Cool. So we've got a really exciting panel today with 3 app promotion experts from a range of verticals. My name's Shumel, General Manager of Apps Humor by InMobi. Today on the panel we've got Martina from PhotoSi. We've got Radostina Jakova from Jam City and Saida Sabir from Kptn Cook. Brilliant. So I think the topic we've got lined up for today is a really interesting topic at the moment where there's been a lot of change over the past year. We know there's been a lot of challenges with ATT. We've definitely seen it have an impact on some of the walled garden partners such as Facebook and Google. And it's leveled the playing field for a lot of other media channels as well. So the topic is really around how can we address diversifying media channels in a privacy-first era. I thought in terms of just kicking off, it's great to get to know our panelists a little bit better. We can go around just getting a quick intro. I think the selection of apps that everyone has on their phone is a good reflection of their personality as well. So we'd love to know what's your favorite app that you can't live without, or what's the one that you've downloaded most recently. So yeah, we'll kick off with Martina.
So hi everyone. I decided to pick one app for the most used now, like it's Share Now. So I'm very lazy in these days, I would say. So I drive a lot, like in Berlin, and it's good, like to have car sharing opportunities in the city. I guess like quite a lot of people are using that app as well. And the most recent downloaded, I would say that it's PicsArt. So PicsArt is a photo editing app, and it's actually the most downloaded app for photo editing. And we are currently doing a partnership, like soon to be with them. So yeah, that's like one of the reasons is very related to our business, but it's a very cool app as well. Yeah.
Great. And Radostina?
Hi everyone. So for me recently, I've been using a lot of Splitwise. And it's because we moved apartments and there were a lot of expenses, so that was really helpful. And also the latest one that I downloaded, it was the app from our Hausverwaltung. So people who live in Germany, they know. And I was thinking, when you said that you're gonna ask this question, I was thinking about that and actually how the most recently used app or the one that downloaded really reflects what stage in your life you are at the moment. So friendly with me moving and taking, the majority of my time is going into that. You could also see it in my downloads.
Brilliant. And Saida?
Well, I don't want to sound salesy, but it's really Kptn Cook. It's not because I work for them. But yeah, I try to cook every day and I have to use Kptn Cook to survive. But if I'm not talking about Kptn Cook, it could be Blinkist. It's a new addiction that I'm developing lately. I've been traveling a lot and it was a good thing to listen to while traveling. And the last one that I have downloaded is TryCount. It's like a Splitwise kind of app. I was traveling with my friends last weekend, and the one who paid for everything used TryCount, so I had to download it. That's all.
Brilliant. Great. And I guess for the room as well, I'm sure they'd love to learn a little bit more about your businesses and to frame a bit of context for some of the discussions we'll have today. It'd be great to learn a little bit more about your business model, the key kind of metrics you guys are working towards as well. Maybe starting with Martina on PhotoSi.
Yeah, so first, like I would introduce the company itself. So PhotoSi is an Italian company, and it's a digital photo printing market leader in Italy. We produce a wide range of like personalized products with your own pictures, basically. So like photo albums, photo books, calendars, photo canvases, like frames, wooden frames, sticky frames, and all the gadgets you can imagine, basically printing like your own pictures on, let's say. As a business model, it's a B2C, so it's pretty much an e-commerce. So you can purchase via website or via app. So the share is 30-70% at the moment, let's say. So the app is growing and growing at the moment, and the share between iOS and Android is almost 50-50. So Yeah, and the MISMA KPIs, I would say the most relevant one we always look at is the overall ROI. So considering the top line and then the overall investment. So that's like the most important because we can still see like overall all the marketing expenses are still sustainable for the company itself. And yeah, I would say that's it, like as a KPI.
Brilliant. And I guess given the nature of your business as well, there's probably an element of seasonality as well. Which is maybe quite different to a lot of other UA businesses or UA operations. How do you take that into consideration?
Yeah, so like that wouldn't change like the main KPI overall. Like so the king KPI would still be that. But yeah, as you said, we have a very high seasonality. So Christmas time is for us the peak season. And Christmas time starts end of November, like let's say like the last 2 weeks of November till the 20th of December, because of course then we need to deliver the products we produce in-house. So there's no time anymore then for the delivery. And then during the year we have other smaller peaks, for example, for Valentine's Day, Father's Day, Mother's Day, and also going back from holidays, for example. But it's, of course, like changing a lot of the budgets we invest like during the year and also like the campaign types and the channels we pick during the year for like the high season or lower season.
Brilliant. Okay, great stuff. So yeah, a lot of variation, I guess, throughout the year. And then moving into Radostina as well, just a bit more background on the business of Jam City and the key KPIs you guys are working towards.
Yeah, so Jam City is a game developer. We have a portfolio of different games. We work with some really big IPs such as Disney, Universal, Jurassic World. We have 2 games. Also Harry Potter. But as well, we have some social casino games, Match 3. I think one of them, maybe the most famous Jam City's game will be Cookie Jam, very old game. So yeah, different types of brands, and I'm part of the UA team, the only one in Europe. My whole team is in the US. And we are very much performance driven. Our North Star metric will be PROAS. This is what we are looking into. But of course, we, along the way to the PROAS goal and targets, we analyze a lot of other metrics such as CPIs, retention rates, IPMs, CPMs, like all the abbreviation that you could hear in a UA meeting, basically. So the focus is always trying to do a deep analysis and be on top of trends.
Got it. And you've mentioned a number of titles there. How do you find it when you're managing so many different titles? Do you find the learnings can be transferable, or do you have to always take like a new approach for every game that you're launching?
In some cases, yes. I think the learnings are applicable. And I think the advantage of having so many different games is that within the team we can communicate and share knowledge. And if something's working for one of the games, we can then try it on the other one. And this also gives a lot of ideas for brainstorming, which is great. But in some other cases, does not really translate that way because even though it's all games, we have games that monetize, for instance, early on, others that require a longer period of time to get purchasers. We have games that are that have bigger share of ad revenue compared to others that are more like IAP driven. And of course, also like the core audience is different because we have some RPG, very like mid-core games, and others that are more like casual, that appeal to a female audience. And on top of that, we have the IPs, so like brands, which is great. It has a lot of advantages because you're working with a big brand, but then you cannot do whatever you like. You cannot just, you have some limitations in terms of language, text, messaging, and what you can put on the video and what you can't. So that creates some caveats when it comes to just performance, like optimization of creatives.
Got it. So yeah, so not always the same economies of scale that you'd expect from so many titles. You definitely need to take each title and potentially relook at how you approach it. And I guess, and lastly on Saida as well, just again, a bit more background for everyone in the room on Kptn Cook, exactly the business model and also some of the goals you guys are working towards.
Of course. So Kptn Cook is a leading cooking app in the DACH region with a rising presence in the US. We work every day to empower people to make better food choices. We accompany our users through their whole cooking journey. We have a large database of recipes that we cook ourselves in our studios in Berlin. So our office, we have food, like good food in our office every day, if anyone wants to stop by. And for the app itself, we have a free version, and that's the version where it's more based on the inspiration part, where people could receive, they receive new daily recipes every day with the steps, with the ingredients and everything else. And then we have the premium version with more unique features that are, I would say, they are more AI-driven kind of features with a recommendation system so that the experience of every user is unique according to their likes and dislikes in food. For our business model, it's a very tricky question here because for us, we have different business models according to the geo. For example, in the DACH region, our focus is the brand partnerships with relevant brands to our app. For example, we have grocery stores brands that sponsor content in our app, or food brands, beverages, drinks for Friday drinks. And that's in the DACH region. So here the KPI or the most focus is the retention, the monthly active users, and the conversion rate in the App Store listing, which is very, very important for us, because we are in the DACH region, we are in the top 10 in our category, so it's very important. In the US, on the other hand, it's a different business model. There, the subscription for the premium version is the main focus. So the subscription conversion rates, the cost per trial, the cost per install, and all this, the subscription KPIs.
Brilliant. So yes, I think one thing you mentioned is quite interesting where you're talking about conversion rate on the App Store, and given the brand appeal that you guys need to generate the ad revenue or partnerships, it sounds like the top 10 listing in the App Store is really important. How do you monitor that or manage ensuring that the listing's quite high when it comes to your UA campaigns?
Yeah, so for the App Store listing conversion rate and KPIs, it's something that we look at every single week with our data science team. As I said, we are in the top 10 of our category, and we cannot afford having a lower conversion rate or play with the conversion rate. So as much as we look at the subscription conversion rate, we look at the App Store listing conversion rate. Sorry, what was the second part of the question?
Yes, I guess, so I think that's quite an interesting topic, maybe one that's not been talked about too much in UA, just the fact of the conversion rate on the App Store listing being quite a key factor. I guess that may have an impact then on not just sending loads of traffic to your campaigns.
Exactly, and such, like as we are talking about ad channel diversification, this is a huge and a big factor in our decision making of staying with a channel or not. Even if if a channel is working good on all the other KPIs, if the CPI is decent, if the cost per trial is decent, but the conversion rate in the App Store is not that good, we kill the channel because, as I said, we cannot play with our position, and we have to stay in this top 10, the top 10 of our category, because, as I said, we have the brand partnerships, and also we have a historical presence in the DACH region that we want to keep, and we want to just keep improving, not degrading.
Great. Great stuff. So I think, hopefully that gives everyone in the audience some background on the businesses. What's really clear is every one of you guys has like a very unique approach, and I think it's a really good representation we've got across the different verticals. So I guess diving into our main topic for today, just really around diversification in the post kind of ATT world. What's your general views on how ATT has impacted your channel mix? And again, I'll open up to any one of you guys that wants to take this one first.
Okay, so for us, I would say like the channel mix didn't really change, and actually Also for PhotoSi, the investments actually increased quite a lot on iOS after the ATT was enforced. We see very good results on iOS, and also like we are trying to measure everything a lot also with scan, and also, for example, as MMP2 we have apps flyer, so now they also released a new feature which is like a SSOT, so it's like a single source of truth they call it, so it's kind of like a cutting out like the people who are already tracked when they give consent, and then with scan instead of duplicating the numbers there. But overall on the industry, like the investment on iOS started to decrease quite a lot, and also to shift from SAN partners towards more DSPs, for example, or like click-link based attribution channels. But for us, it didn't apply because in any case, like we see very good results on the top line overall, and also the metrics lower like more upper funnel are still looking very, very good. So also CPMs like are looking fine, and CTR, and also like in terms of CPI, so going downwards, like we can still see like a very good return. And iOS users for us are very valuable because also they have like an average order value which is quite high. So yeah, that comes back then in terms of revenues as well.
Got it.
Yeah.
So yes, so not massive changes on PhotoSi's end. And for you guys, did you see much change with iOS in terms of how much you were investing post ATT or the selection of channels you guys were using?
Yeah, I like, at least from my perspective in gaming, there was, of course, there are exceptions, but there was a big shift from Facebook and UAC to DSPs, video networks. Apple search ads grew a lot. A lot of people started taking it a bit more seriously. They started, a lot of advertisers, they started really experimenting more, trying to understand it better, trying to experiment. This is something I'm seeing also on our side. And I think like back last year when the iOS 14 launched, a lot of advertisers really rushed into pausing down all the like iOS campaigns because they didn't know what to expect. And no one, or like maybe very few people, thought that the actual iOS rollout, like the adoption rates, won't be 100% from one day to another. So I think there was a bit of a like missed opportunity there, but maybe this was created because of like panic or just to be prepared. And then things moved into a direction where people started shifting more budgets to Android, which bumped up CPMs, and some channels such as Facebook became very expensive. And might be that some of the advertisers even stopped all UI efforts on Facebook altogether because of that. And I think what I've been seeing recently is that a lot of people started actually experimenting more with the conversion schema on scan. They are more prepared now. They have the MMP solution, or you could also experiment with your internal one. And now there are more tests that are run on social networks. TikTok is one actually network that I see raising a lot recently and actually delivering really strong performance. So there were some shifts, and I think there will be still like more shifts in the next year.
Got it. Yeah. So some reduction in iOS investment and some move away from the big channels in terms of Facebook and Google, and diversifying a bit more on your end. And Saida, on your side, did you see something similar? Or?
For us, like I didn't see like a huge shift, but more the need to test more channels, because for us as PhotoSi, we have seasonality as well. It's a big part of our business. We have January, the year of resolutions. We have the Black Friday, the Christmas, and so on. And in this period, our historical channels, they reach now, after ATT, they reach this saturation level where we cannot spend more without impacting our KPIs. And and that's why it's very important for us to test channels all year long, so that we know that, for example, in January, we know that the channel worked for us and we add it to the mix, and so on. So I would say that this is how the ATT like impacted us, because testing new channels wasn't really something that we did before.
Got it. Okay, interesting. So yeah, so post ATT, I guess key takeaway from our panelists today is it looks like there's a need to test more channels. There's a lot more competitive pressure on the likes of Facebook and so on. So I guess diving a bit deeper into how you guys would go about testing new channels, at what point would you, what are the indicators to suggest that you need to start looking at new channels? I think you mentioned potentially around certain KPIs dropping. Are you guys able to expand on that a little bit more?
Yeah, exactly. So there's always a point, from my experience, there's always a point where you cannot, if you add more budget, you just see your CPIs are going higher and your frequency is going higher, the CPM is going higher. And that's the moment when I think you should start thinking of adding a new channel, at least testing it. And that's the case for us, at least. That's about, what was the second part of that?
Yeah, no, it's just understanding at what point, might you test more channels? And I guess...
Exactly.
Yeah. And Martina, what about for yourself? At what point would you consider testing?
So I would say it really depends also on the overall budgets you have. First, of course, so the monthly budget counts a lot here in terms of how many channels you can have and which channels to pick. Also, if your app, for example, or your product is sold only in one geo, or if it's more than one geo, so the monthly budget, of course, if it applies to one small geo is one thing. If it applies to tons of geos, then it's a different thing. And then also if the audience, for example, is a broad audience or a more niche market, so that's also something else to consider. But I would say if the audience is broad, you start first with the main channels, so meaning Facebook and Google, Google search at least. Google AC campaigns you can add, but not necessarily straight away from the start. And then Apple search ads as well, because all the search bars needs to be covered, in my opinion, when people are actively looking for something related to your product, not necessarily your brand name, which of course needs to be covered, but also competitors' names is also very useful, of course, to be covered with search campaigns. And then when you see as we were saying, when KPI starts looking bad, and it's not only one moment, because of course CPM can be also impacted just for 1 month or for one period. There are periods also that are more expensive than others, so it cannot be okay, 2 weeks the KPIs are going worse, then I test another channel. No, it should be a little bit more long-term period. And then I would start adding probably another social media. So also for us, actually, TikTok is working quite well at the moment. We have seen a huge change there when you really use creatives which are relevant for the users and user-generated content. So it must be in TikTok style, no official branding videos and stuff like that. That will never work on TikTok. And then from there, you can move on, I would say, with DSPs, and if your budgets are great and huge, you can also go to TV and radio. And so those would be for me the things to consider when expanding.
Got it.
Yeah.
So definitely keeping an eye on KPIs, that being kind of the leading indicator. Once you start seeing a level of saturation is when you consider expanding. And I guess it really then depends on budgets in terms of how far you might want to expand. And do you see the same thing on Jam City's end as well?
Yeah, I would say budget is definitely a limitation. If you don't have the budget, then there's not much you can do. But in my opinion, I think it's very important to all the time have a test running, or at least testing something maybe within already the existing channel, because you sooner or later will reach a point, a plateau point, where you need to have yourself covered. There are very few cases and channels that can go running without really much of input, if there are any at all. And so one way I'm looking into it, of course, is when the performance starts going down, which normally is represented by increase in cost per acquisition, and that of course reflects negatively the ROAS if ROAS does not follow, meaning with increased cost you're not acquiring more valuable users anymore, you're just acquiring the same users. So that's how I approach it. But I would always, depending on how many channels I have, I would always try to test within the channel if there is already like a good mix, and then expand.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, so definitely trying to exhaust a channel and all the options possible before looking beyond that. Saida, you mentioned that you're looking to always test kind of all year round as well. Do you typically have like a percentage you allocate from your budget to say like this is my test budget to just constantly test new channels?
I try to always negotiate around 10% of my budget to testing. And Martina actually touched a very important point about testing new channels while taking into consideration geos. And this is something that I negotiate in the budget as well, because saying 10%, okay, but on which market? Is it the DACH market or the US market? And from our experience in Kptn Cook, for so many channels, I think most of the channels that we tested, so many times the channel works for the DACH region, it doesn't work as good for the US and so on. So yeah, so 10% and 10% for like with the taken into consideration which market and which channel we are using.
Brilliant. And another topic I think, Martina, you touched on earlier was around how long you may give a new channel that you're testing before, deciding whether it's good enough to continue or not. What do you guys usually see as a good time period to test a new channel?
So that depends also like on the nature of the channel itself, and of course like the budgets you are investing and what is exactly a test. So there are some, for example, formats you can boost like a huge budget in just one day, like highly branding, but then that's like the test is just one day, so the results you're going to collect after one day. Then on average, I would say like if it's especially a channel which is related to data, so like for example programmatic advertising in general, so if it's a DSP, one thing you need to consider is also the amount of data your app or website is able in any case to feed the algorithm with, and on average I would say like minimum 2-3 weeks at least with a decent budget. So like for a test less than 20-25K would not make a sense in those cases. Yeah, so that you can have like at least significant results, and also the machine learning of the algorithm can work. So I would add maybe on the channel topic and selection, also we allocate kind of 10% for testing of our budget. But of course, like if a test is very easy to implement and you can do it quite quickly, and let's say the effort and budgets needed is not that much, then you can also test it quite fast, so it's not necessarily following the rule I said before. But then if you want to go to more structured channels, then it has to be a proper test, then otherwise it's just wasting money, in my opinion.
Yeah,
so
yeah, that's really interesting. So understanding how long the actual platforms need, or what the daily caps is needed from a platform to actually make the test worthwhile. Otherwise you could be just spending a lot of money. And do you guys see the same thing there in terms of the amount of time you would give? Is there any set framework or a level at which point you'd say you'd turn off a test?
Yeah, definitely. In terms of budgeting, I try to understand what is the time that they need to ramp up or to get to a stable level. The different channels, as Martina mentioned, need different learning phase to exit. But I also look into trend. Like if I see a positive trend, then I'll keep on testing and iterating. As long as there is improvement over time, then, or as long as I believe in the channel, I'll keep on going. But of course, I think like my max will be up to 3 months. And depends also, of course, of the overall investment. So you could spend, with some channels, they need more in these 3 months. Others don't need that much investment. So yeah, it's more like an ad hoc, case to case. We're looking into it. But I think what's interesting for Jamsit is that we have a very structured way of planning these experiments and reporting them, and we keep a really good track of what has been tested, what is the results, and we allocate budget separately on a monthly basis. We work a lot with data science to also define what share of our budgets will go into experiments, and we look into these different experiments either as a channel exploration, campaign exploration, or geo. So it's
Brilliant.
very...
Yes, it sounds very scientific.
Yeah, it's
Brilliant. And Saida, on your side as well, in terms of any frameworks for how long you might keep a new campaign
For
live?
us, it would be for 4 to 6 weeks if the channel makes it through the first week. Because as I said, once we start running the channel, we look at the app sources in the App Store. And if our conversion rate or our store data are hurt, we just kill the channel from the first week. We cannot afford improving or trying to optimize it anymore because the traffic is not that good for our listing. Then once it makes it through the first week, that's when we work on improving the KPIs and see how the trend is there in that new channel. I think 6 weeks is a decent time frame to to give the channel the chance to fire up. If in 6 weeks the KPIs are still not as good as the other channels or just not reaching the goals that we had when we started planning the channel, we just kill it.
Yeah, okay,
And
so
I actually have a question. For the conversion rate on the App Store, do you consider also volume? Because, for instance, if it's a small volume, do you see that it also impacts that much the conversion rate?
That's the thing, because for testing a new channel, the volume is always not more than the channels that are already running because the budget is less. And also, when you start testing a new channel in the beginning, the CPIs are more expensive, which is completely normal. So, no, the volume is usually and most of the time is smaller than the volume that we get from the other channels. So it's easy to spot how it's impacting the overall CPI. If it gets so bad, it just impacts the overall not CPI but the conversion rates.
brilliant. So yes, I think we've covered a lot on at what point should we be looking at new channels and the selection criteria as well. One question that we just had from the audience as well is where do you find new partners and how do you go about doing that? Do you like to have your own shortlist or is there a certain criteria you'll look at when you decide if someone even in the running to be tested?
So for me, it depends really again on which kind of channel. So some smaller channels are also kind of approaching directly with, for example, now we are doing a test on native advertising, but it's quite small and also a direct buying, for example, via a very, very connected business app, let's say, so we can just directly do direct buying with them and the test is going to be very small. So in those cases, it's more either finding possible partners for that and or directly other partners approaching us. In terms of the bigger channels, also before PhotoSi I was working at Delivery Hero and before that HelloFresh, so I had the chance there to test quite a lot of channels overall. So I kind of know the main ones and also how they perform and what they are good for normally. So yeah, if you don't have a previous experience job-wise, I would suggest to follow what we said before. So first try to saturate with the main channels, then try more with paid social, can be TikTok and be Snapchat, for example. It also needs to be relevant for the country you're in because there are some countries which are heavily Snapchat based, others which are not. So try to also understand where your users are. And also if it's a niche market, also that it has to be relevant to your audience. So you need to find where your target audience is mainly as a channel, and then move forward with DSPs if you want to and you have sufficient budgets to test that. Yeah.
Great. Okay. And DSPs is where you would say would be your kind of next place to go after the self-attributing networks.
Yeah, exactly. So when you finish also with paid social, other option, let's say, so TikTok/Snapchat, I would go then for DSP. But DSPs, at least the biggest and best ones, they really need a high budget as a test, and you need to commit at least 2-3 months. If you start 2 weeks and then you're okay, KPIs are looking bad and I'm gonna quit the test, then just don't do it because you're gonna commit probably a 25K as a test budget, and then they will just be gone. So the algorithm will learn nothing from the beginning. So, yeah.
Brilliant. And on your end, in terms of where you guys look for when you're going for new channels, is there like a short list that you guys have of who you might want to test next? If I'm sure there's a lot of channels always kind of contacting you and wanting to try and get these test budgets going.
Yeah, I normally 99% go with my network and my colleagues' recommendations, and very rarely will go for a channel that contacted me. So I'm vetting them through the network first.
Yeah.
And then in terms of like how often, it's again like an ad hoc basis. So if there is any channel that is interesting, we're able to allocate budget to test it. So we don't really limit ourselves with a certain number, and we don't keep them in pipeline. We are fast.
Got it.
Yeah.
For us, it's a bit of both. Of course, there are channels that are recommended by other performance marketeers or people that we talk to most of the time, and channels that worked for them, and we say, okay, let's test them. And I also give the chance to the channels that reach out to me. For that, we just get into a meeting and talk and share with them our goals and ask them if they think that they can reach these goals. I always make sure that we are always like on the same page, that we have a commitment. This is our goal. And you think that you can reach it, we plan it. We put KPIs. This is the KPI that we want to reach, and this is the CPI, for example, or this is the cost per trial, and so on, and run the campaign together. So a little bit of both for us.
Brilliant. Great. Well, I think we've extensively covered testing new channels. I think a lot of takeaways from the panel. I think while we got last few minutes, just diving a bit deeper into SK ad network and measurement as well. When you are running multiple channels, have you found measurement with SK ad network particularly difficult, or how are you guys going about that today?
So, so we are using like a conversion schema for scan since quite a lot, let's say, at this point. Scan we see with as I said, with single source of truth now, which is merging both the attributed regularly, so the tracked people and the scan users. We see scan is slightly overestimating some channels compared to others. But yeah, it's one of the ways we try to understand the data is also looking at the tracked part as well only, or then also at scan only, so to understand the connection between the two. So if there is also a correlation in the data, and then of course we see also what's happening in the real backend, so all the overall acquisitions of new customers, for example. And another thing which is very old style but still kind of works sometimes is a voucher-based attribution. It depends also on the promotions they have, but for example, for influencer marketing, it works quite well. So in terms of tracked on AppsFlyer, we don't have much, but then people really use the vouchers that the influencer is saying, for example. So, yeah. Okay,
brilliant. And just one question that came in as well was related to the topic of measurement with Scan. Do you use a mix of probabilistic attribution and SK ad network when you're testing kind of broader channels outside of Facebook and Google?
Yeah, we do use a mix. In our case, I would say maybe in majority of the cases rely more on probabilistic. But we are working on our scan testing, and we are testing some solution, like the MMP solution versus our internal solution. We are putting a lot of efforts in that because we believe that maybe probabilistic will be gone at some point. So we do have a separate testing going on scan for different partners like UAC, Facebook, TikTok.
Brilliant.
Yeah, and maybe just to add, we also look at platform data as well a bit. So Google Ads Manager, for example, we still see what's going on, just on the attribution based on Google data and Firebase, for example, as well. Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. And yeah, just want to make sure we get a couple of the questions that came in as well. There's one more maybe for Saida as well, just in terms of why is store conversion so important, as there are networks that generate users cheaper with lower but average cost per target?
In the DACH region, even if it's cheaper, but the quality of the traffic is not good, it hurts our MAUs and our retention rate in the app itself. And as I said, this is the main KPI in the DACH region. So it doesn't make sense to spend less knowing that this person won't come back, and then we have to pay again for the same user. But on the other hand, if the traffic is better, we know that that person is going to come back again, is going to open the app again, and so that's at least for the DACH region, it makes sense to go with this approach.
Great. Cool. So I think we're just hitting time. I think we've managed to answer all the questions from the audience. I'm sure the ladies are around the rest of the day today if you guys do want to dive deeper into any of their answers and topics today. But yeah, just want to say thank you for being on the panel and giving everyone loads of good takeaways.
Thank you.
Thank you.